Hello and welcome to a new podcast from the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden. My name is Hussein Askary. Today is March the 1st, 2022. As everybody knows, we have a quite dramatic situation in the world. Everybody can notice that with the situation in Ukraine, Russia, and the whole problem with NATO. It's our strong belief in the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden, as the map behind me tells, that the best way to establish peace and stability and prosperity is through economic cooperation among nations, through diplomacy and mutual respect for nations. That's our very strong belief, and therefore we will focus on these matters even in this very harsh situation. If we look at Ukraine, for example, Ukraine could be a perfect bridge between East and West. Right now, it's like a wall between East and West. And therefore, this is a very important matter, which I would like today to discuss with our guest, special guest, Professor Li Xing. He's a professor of development and international relations in the Aalborg University in Denmark. Welcome, Professor Li.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your invitation.
Thank you too for taking the time to be with us today. We actually, when we first talked, it was in January before the Chinese New Year. We were supposed to talk about the China-EU relations. But since then, we have had these incredible dramatic developments in Eastern Europe. And therefore, it's unavoidable to discuss that matter first and what is China's position on that. But first of all, you have a book which was published in 2019. It's called Mapping China's One Belt, One Road. And I have ordered the book. It has not arrived in the mail. I would like you to tell our viewers why it's interesting for them to read that book. What is in it?
Okay. This book was published 2018, 2019. And this book is important to present what is today's China. Okay, what has China reached today? China has reached to a new stage from the early status as a rule follower to today's status as rule maker. Belt and Road project representing the first major project of China as a rule maker, because it's a Chinese project and Chinese investment. And China is rule maker. Okay, so this is very important. Second, it presents the transition that China is moving from the old development model, growth model, which is labor-intensive, low-cost manufacturing, but to today, consumption, service, innovation, high-tech, and internationalization of Chinese currency. So you can see that it represents China's transition from one model to another model. But it also shows that like all Western countries historically, all powers, they went through a period where their development has reached to a certain limit, certain constraint, such as overcapacity and overproduction. When China moved from old model to the new model, how about the old model? How about old industries? Okay, so when China made analysis and China found out that China suffered from overcapacity, overproduction, but Chinese neighbors, actually they really need infrastructure. They are very poor in infrastructure standard. So it's a win-win situation. Okay, so in that sense, so what we call a Belt and Road project as a spatial fix. That is a Marxist understanding. Spatial fix means that you are reaching to a stage where you have a limited space. You need to find new space. So Belt and Road.
You reach a frontier. You have to cross.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But Belt and Road also touches a lot of what we call the geopolitical context between the existing power and the rising power, what we call sphere of interest. And the end of Belt and Road is Eastern Europe. Okay, that's Europe. And Eastern Europe is the sphere of EU's interest. So definitely there are a lot of conflicts, okay, which means that BRI will involve a lot of conflicts. Yeah. And EU, for example, is not only concerned about the geopolitical factors EU is also very much concerned about Chinese diffusion power, which means that the success of Chinese development model, Chinese model production, Chinese investment will have spillover effects over BRI countries, especially in Eastern Europe. In the book, one chapter actually talk about how China is actually diffusing its policy-making effect, which means that the way Chinese policy makers, how they design policy, how they plan economic development is very attractive. So you can see that the Chinese normal diffusion is actually happening. So, so EU is very concerned. And also Belt and Road cannot also avoid some other issues, which is very much around debating Chinese development, such as the debt trap, such as whether China is a new colonialism, whether China is a new imperialism. So all these are also around Belt and Road project.
We will discuss the matter actually, how, because this pertains a lot also to Africa, Asia, Latin America, I mean, the developing sector, how China and the EU and even the United States can work together for alleviating poverty, because the Chinese model, as you say, lifted 800 million people out of poverty in record time.
Yeah.
This is a huge lesson for the rest of the world.
Yes.
Anyway,
you're right.
Yes,
exactly.
We will come back to that question. It's very important.
And my last point from the book is that BRI also tests China's non-intervention policy. And this is also connected with the Ukraine crisis. And China's foreign policy has one principle, that is non-intervention. China does not want to interfere in other countries' sovereignty. And this project really is testing China, because if you invest a lot of money in another country, if that country is in trouble, are you sure you are not going to make any intervention or not?
Right.
In order to save your money. So this book actually gives readers a variety of information.
Very good, very good. I'm looking forward to receiving the book in the mail. Now, as you mentioned the case of Ukraine now, everybody is wondering what is China's position on what's going on between Russia, Ukraine, Russia, the EU, Russia, NATO, and so on, because people think there's a certain ambiguity about where China stands. Some people want China to be completely on this side or completely on that side. What is your take on what is China's position today?
I think that if you think about the timeline, okay, now I'm talking about my own opinion. I'm not representing any official opinion. If you think about timeline, then you could say that China was in one way or another connected. Putin came to the Olympic ceremony, okay, and talked with Xi Jinping and signed a joint statement. After he returned, after a few days, the Olympic finished. When Olympic finished, the war started. Okay, so people must think there are some kind of connections. Okay, which means that at least China was informed of Russia's movement. Okay, now the situation is putting China in a very, very awkward situation. If you read the Chinese social media, I will tell you more than 90% of Chinese, overwhelmingly support Russia. They are not supporting war, but they are supporting Russia's concern, or Russia has certain legitimacy, just like the United States attacking Iraq under some kind of concern or legitimacy. Okay, and Chinese.
I think the Chinese citizens and netizens, they have a longer memory of what has happened in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Libya, in Syria. So these are not forgotten.
Exactly. Thank you for your understanding. Actually, China is in a very awkward situation because China definitely supports Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty, and this is China's long-standing foreign policy principle. Okay, but at the same time, it also shares concern of Russia's national security in the face of the NATO enlargement. And NATO has, betrayed 5 times its promise. Okay, extended, and somehow Ukraine was the bottom line. So China is standing in a very awkward situation. On the one side, supporting sovereignty, integrity, territorial integrity, and on the other side, also share the concern about Russia. So now that China refused to condemn Russia's invasion. Why? That China says, as you just said, that how about the Iraqi war? How about Yugoslavia? When NATO bombed Yugoslavia and bombed Chinese embassy, and don't forget 3 or 4 people, Chinese journalists and diplomats died. So Chinese officials still remember how about sovereignty and in territorial integrity of Yugoslavia.
Right. They don't like double standards in that sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is because of a double standards.
Okay.
China hate it.
Yes.
China hate it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know about, or most people should know about the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. China follows, but the most important is the national sovereignty and independence of nations. But there was in the joint statement between which President Putin and President Xi Jinping reached during the Olympics. This was a very, very important but very comprehensive document, which set the tone for completely new economic, strategic, and even on a global level, a new paradigm in relations among nations. Can you elaborate on what is the most important points in that declaration?
Yes, thank you.
And if it is a new alliance, or is it just the general principles?
Okay, let me tell you this, that I have come across many bilateral or multilateral statements, a declaration, joint communique, something like that. Okay, I have never come across such. This is the first time I've read such a comprehensive bilateral joint statement between 2 countries. It covers almost everything, okay? International relations, governance, values, norms, security, technology, climate change, health, you name it, okay? So it almost set up, put forward a vision of world order, actually. It's a world order that the both countries agree this should be a justified world, or this would have been a justified world order. Okay, and the joint statement emphasized new era, and the two terms are very important. One is new era, another is redistribution of power. It says the new era described by the joint statement says that it's now we are in the new era: multipolarity, economic globalization, information society, cultural diversity, transformation of global governance, architecture, world order, independence, etc., etc. And they say because of this new era, their conclusion is, the joint statement conclusion is this: now we are towards the redistribution of power in the world. And right after, 1 week after this joint statement, the war started. So you can see there are some kind of nexus between that what they think is justified word and what is the bottom line which they have drawn. Because this Ukraine issue is also connected with Chinese issue, Taiwan. Right. Actually, there are more debates within China, within Taiwan these days, much more hot than Ukraine in Europe. You understand? These 2 issues are, if you read from internet, all kind of news, Taiwan, Ukraine, they are much more connected today. Right. Because the same issue, in many ways, about sovereignty, about territorial integrity, all Western powers declare in the world there is only one China. Taiwan is part of China. The PRC is the sole legitimate government, but at the same time they support Taiwan. So you understand? Right. So double standard is what China is really angry about. Yeah. You mentioned the question of redistribution of power. That it's not meant that there should be bipolar world, but that's not what the point is, because we might have people talk about the new Cold War. We will have an iron curtain now falling between East and West, right in Eastern Europe. But the issue is, as I think it was emphasized by Chinese and even Russian officials, that what has primacy is the United Nations Charter. Yeah. And I think there's a group in the United Nations which is called the Friends of the United Nations Charter. Yeah.
because China and Russia say, look, we can't accept, we have to follow international law, we have to follow the UN Charter, not the so-called rules-based order.
Yeah.
Because the rules-based order, who sets the rules? And that's where the conflict is. But it's not meant that China and Russia want to divide the world power by redistributing that power. That's not what is meant here.
No. Actually, that this is what joint statement says: multipolarity, globalization, interdependence. Actually, the joint statement is very clear about there will be no iron war again, because every country is on the global division of labor. Every country is on global supply chain, value chain. So you really can't have Russia is the biggest provider of energy and gas to Europe.
Right.
Okay, today is Europe's disaster, this war. So I do not think there will be iron war, but politically, I am not very sure. What I want to say is that economically there will be no iron war, but politically this war will create Cold War mentality again. Okay, because after the Cold War, you can remember that what Fukuyama, the American political scientist, he declared the end of history, where that the Western world has won the war, United States has won the war. Now we are the rule maker. Okay. So this, how many decades? I think 3 decades of unipolarity was the disaster. Planted a lot of double standard, as we are discussing about. Plant a lot of this kind of we are the rule maker, and the United States always talk about rule-based order. Don't forget, United States told China several times the rule-based order. China said no. Only United Nations, as you rightly point out, United Nations is the rule-based order, not you, not Europe.
Right. Yeah, that brings us to the main point we were intending to discuss, because last year, 2021, we started this podcast series by the first podcast was on the because the year 2021 started with the signing or the reaching of the agreement for the China-EU Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, the CAI, between the leaders of the EU and China, President Xi Jinping. There was a joint conference call. But then the European Parliament rejected the same agreement. Why, what was the reason for rejecting the agreement, and why such an agreement is so crucial for East-West relations, but also specifically EU-China?
Thank you. This comprehensive agreement on investment called CAI, Comprehensive Agreement on Investment. As far as I remember, it took 13 years. It took EU and China 13 years to reach. So the agreement was reached on December 30th, 2020. It's very interesting, the last day, almost the last day, okay? And it involves so many important aspects, okay? It covers aspects of trade, ownership, technology transfer, intellectual property, and also normative aspects such as labor rights, okay? So I also read many comments from Chinese social media, from my network in China. Many Chinese are very upset with this. They think that China has made too many concessions. But indeed, China made a lot of concessions, especially on fully owned foreign enterprises and investment. China always has a policy that any foreign capital, any foreign enterprise, if they want to come to China, they have to make joint venture with Western companies. Western companies cannot own fully a company or enterprises in China. But this agreement somehow gave European a great concession. And Americans is very jealous, because Americans, they have been fighting with China for decades in order to gain this status. China, because of Trump's trade war, all these kind of sanctions against Huawei, or China does not have any mood to negotiate with the United States. So EU got it. So you should be very happy. Unfortunately, as you said, that the parliament didn't pass this bill because, you know, Hong Kong issue, Xinjiang issue, these two issues. Hong Kong demonstration created a lot of conflict between EU and China. Later on, Xinjiang, a human rights issue, a labor rights issue became also a big issue. So because of these two issues that making China and EU really in a bad position, EU sanctioned China, and China backfired with double sanction.
Right.
Okay. EU sanctioned maybe 4 persons or institutions. China backfired with 8 sanctions against 4 institutions.
But these are more political, or I mean, there were no economic sanctions in that sense. I mean, there's so much interdependence between Europe and China. We saw what happened when the supply chains were broken in the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, we had huge problems here in Sweden, factories closing in Europe, even on the Chinese side. So this was a terrible thing. But now, even with this situation in Ukraine, I mean, we have the China-EU Express, the railway freight, the connections are now broken. I mean, most of them go through Belarus, but Belarus is involved in this conflict. So therefore, it's how important for Europe and China to keep working on these economic matters. And, you know, I mean, the Chinese say, let's be pragmatic, okay? We don't agree on political systems. Our political system is different than your political system. We want to work together on things we agree upon, that our economic relations are important, economic development is important, scientific, technological progress and exchange, cultural exchange is important, but that the fact that we have different political and social systems, this should be left aside, because this is our own business. You have your own business. We are not trying to impose our system on you. But the Europeans say, no, we have to, the most important thing is the so-called values, and these are Western values. How do we solve that problem?
Yeah, as you rightly point out, that this is what I emphasize many times, that this is a Cold War product. After Cold War, the West won the war, and this kind of triumphalism, okay, feelings and mentality leads to such a declaration that EU or United States mean that the Western values are universal. So that's the problem. The Western values are universal. China says, no, not the universal. This is yours. The joint statement between Russia and China states very clearly that different countries have different systems. They must follow their own systems according to their history, social political system, tradition, etc., etc. Okay, but we have to understand that China is EU's largest trading partner. As you point out, interdependency is very high. Okay, even China's EU trade is larger than China with the United States, the EU with the United States. So it's very bad that this agreement was not signed, implemented. But I believe that that because I've heard so many speeches from European leaders talking about that it was just suspended. Both sides are still working on that. One day it will be signed. So I think there is a space still open for both sides to restart this process of signing the document, because it took 30 years if we give up, really. And also don't forget the European companies, they suffer, right? Because of the boycott, because of the sanctions against China. H&M, for example, the big shopper, H&M, they have to stop using Xinjiang's cotton. Then Chinese consumers say, okay, if you do not use our cotton, we will not buying your products. So many Chinese voluntarily boycott H&M products. H&M is losing a lot of money. So, but later H&M had to make concessions. So they put announcement on the internet. Try to cool down, try to cool down. So it's a sanctions or this kind of conflict are destructive on both sides. As you point out, that EU and China must move forward. This agreement is very, very important.
Yeah, that's very important. I think this brings us to the next point, which is on the positive note. We want to figure out how we can work together, how the nations of the world could get together. And the Belt and Road Initiative is a great mode of operation, modus operandi, as it's called. And that, I mean, the more bad things are said about the Belt and Road Initiative in the West, the more nations are joining it. I mean, during the Olympics, Argentina joined now we have like 140 plus and probably 150 nations. That's a majority of the world nations joining. Those who are not joining the Belt and Road are actually a minority today. But that does not show that we have actually a divided world, but we have a problem where there's a rejection of the Belt and Road Initiative as a mode of cooperation among nations. Now, the EU have proposed the so-called Global Gateway as a counter, as a rival to the Belt and Road. And the United States proposed during the G7 meeting last year, the Build Back Better World. Also, they claim it's a rival, it will rival the Belt and Road Initiative. And I don't think the nations of Africa or Ibero-America or Asia are happy to hear that there's this conflict between all these powers having one or the other. They have to choose one or the other among these initiatives. But is it possible to reconcile these different initiatives into one? What would be the best for the world nations, for the whole world, to is it the Belt and Road Initiative itself? Is it now China and Europe are saying now that it's possible to put together the Global Gateway, find a way of matching it with the Belt and Road rather than becoming rivals and working against each other? How do you see the solution to this complex?
First of all, let me give you some information about BRI. And Europe is part of BRI already in the east, especially eastern part. And this formula called 17+1, China cooperating with 17 countries. And those countries, especially the Balkans, now we have a problem, especially the Balkans, they are part of BRI already. And Italy is one of the only 7 countries that signed, part of the BRI project, which create a lot of controversials. But anyway, that Italy joined. So which means, and today, 148 countries signed BRI, 32 international organizations signed BRI. So BRI is a huge. EU put forward called Global Gateway Strategy. I do not see this as conflict with BRI because I see it as I see both as two sides of same coin. Because that before BRI, Africa, Latin America, they had only West or United States as the provider of international aid. Then when China rose to be a big power, and Chinese investment, Chinese BRI become another option. So Africa and Latin America, they can choose now, okay? But now EU come up with a new strategy, Global Gateway Strategy, that EU has to compete with Chinese Belt and Road. So Africa and Latin America, especially the Global South, now they are facing even another option. So the more option you have, the more competition between the two sides. So which means that for the Global South is good news because EU and China, they have to compete for providing a better treatment, better conditions, okay? For example, one of the Chinese advantage is China doesn't have any political condition in any of Chinese investment. You know that China is against about preconditions, but
right. No political strings attached.
Yes,
that's the big obstacle for the European proposal.
Yeah, that put pressure on EU and the United States. So I do not see it as a conflict, but I do not see so positive this Build back better world. I do not see that. You know why? Because the United States is the first class world power with third world infrastructure. Honestly, I don't know if you have been to the United States. I've been there several times.
I have read the reports of the American Engineers Society about the US infrastructure. In 2019, they got D+.
Yes. Yes.
They got D+. I mean, if you go to your parents with a D+ from school, they will be very angry at you.
Yeah,
so
exactly. So Biden proposed a $3 trillion budget. It was attacked, boycotted by the Republican. Now it became only 1.2 trillion. Even 1.2 trillion, they were still bargaining, debating. Okay, so such a small money, how can you do? You have to use the money to build your own country's infrastructure, let alone mentioning helping other countries. So I do not see this build back better world. I do not see that.
Yeah, they're one of the big problems we have with these proposals, like even the European, the global gateway, is there is no focus really on what you mentioned, infrastructure. Because to elevate poverty, I mean, the Chinese model is not like the rich people give money to the poor people and then you have equal. What China did is it developed its infrastructure, its industrial capacity, and improved the infrastructure in the rural areas, and they made the rural areas people more productive. That's how, but without infrastructure, you cannot do that. Without transport, without electricity, without water, without healthcare, without education. These are not really priorities either in the American proposal or the European proposal. The European proposal is trying to reach a bit further. They talk about infrastructure, but the huge emphasis on social, political reforms, transparency, corruption, all these things, which that's really not how you solve the problem of poverty. You have to start with building infrastructure. And this is what distinguishes the Belt and Road Initiative and China's work than the other.
You catch the essence. I have to be honest with you. You have caught the essence. In China, we have a slogan. This is a very good slogan. If you want to be rich, build the road. That's the slogan. If you want to get rich, build the road. What China, I don't need to say more because you have already said so many things. That's exactly what, when China, let me give you one example. The AIIB, the China-based Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. There are three Chinese principles, which are, because China is the largest share, okay? Yeah. There are three Chinese principles which be kind of accepted. First principle is that no political conditionality. China doesn't want to accept this. Second, all money must be used on infrastructure. Don't use the money on, promoting democracy, human rights, promoting NGOs, promoting civil societies, but that's something else. But this money has to be used on infrastructure. Third, developing countries, the share of the bank must be larger. Okay, so you can see this, that the Chinese principles, and Chinese believe that even if a country is corrupted, let's say a country leader is corrupted, but the airport is for public, the road is for public, the school is for public. You understand my point? Is that but the Europeans, they want to use the money to to raise the level of democracy, human rights, to cultivate a communication exchange, good governance, all this soft power infrastructure. But the China
even there's a problem with the aid, making Africa, for example, addicted to aid rather than development, real development. There is another aspect which actually has contributed to corruption in those countries where you send money, where you give money to groups and organizations. I think the Chinese way is not doing that. There's no money involved. China, even when it comes to large-scale infrastructure, there is no money involved. I mean, China loans the money, but there's no money transferred to the country where the infrastructure is being built. The Chinese say, we will build the infrastructure project, we will employ your people, your engineers, and deliver the project, but there is no money involved.
Yeah.
in the other case, we have had large amounts of both money, but also materials are given to the country without any accountability. And that means that people in power can take that money or, or the materials and use them to enrich themselves or to gain more power by controlling that aid. And that's a big problem.
You're right. You're right. Of course, there is one problem which the West is criticizing China. That is because China uses its own engineers, laborers to help the country's building of the infrastructure. Then they criticizing China for not using the local labor. So there is some kind of criticism towards China. But otherwise, you're right.
But there was a McKinsey study in 2018, which studied 10,000 Chinese projects in Africa, and they actually, the outcome was that the majority of the workers are local, and even engineers and at the management level, because the Chinese worker has become very expensive, and they don't really want to go to areas where there are security risks, health risks, to do projects. I mean, sometimes an African country wants a project built very, very quickly, record time. Then the Chinese say, well, we will have to bring our workers and engineers. But that's not what happens with the long-term projects, railways and so on. You cannot manage them in 2 or 3 months. And therefore, there is need to employ, and I think those countries themselves, they should insist on having their local workers involved. That's the responsibility of the government of that country when they negotiate with China, because it's very important to transfer the knowledge and know-how to the local people. There was one interesting case where there's how the positive competition between Europe and China can work in Africa, for example. I know one very good example from Egypt. Egypt now is on a very, very rapid development process. And it's attractive both to East and West, also because of its strategic position in the region. Now there are Chinese investments there, but also German investments. There's a competition between Germany and China to invest more in Egypt. There was in 2019, Egypt and China reached an agreement to build a high-speed railway from the Red Sea, the Suez Sukhna port, to the west, to the Al Alamein and Alexandria, passing through the capital, or the new administrative capital. And there was an agreement signed with a Chinese Egyptian consortium. But then Siemens went there. I mean, the chairman of Siemens, Joe Kaiser, who's a friend of the president of Egypt, he went there personally and said, look, we can do this project much cheaper, much quicker, and we'll provide the loans. So the Egyptians changed their mind and said, well, if it's cheaper and quicker than the Chinese, we give the project to Siemens, to the Germans. And the Siemens was supported by the German government, of course, and banks. So therefore, I mean, this is what you call the Sputnik moment, where there's a race to do something positive, not by stopping each other, but by, I think it was President Xi Jinping who said to Trump, we need to compete like two sprinters on the track, not like two boxers, beating each other.
But another example I want to give in connection with Egypt. Egypt is such a good example. Egypt is building a new capital.
Right.
And the whole construction, what is called contract, is given to China. And Egypt got a lot of, criticisms. That Egypt said is, if you can do like Chinese, one day they can build 3 floors. Just one day they can build 3 floors. I give you a contract. Can you do that?
Yes.
You can. So I just want to say that Egypt is very, very, appreciating Chinese efficiency. In building infrastructure, the skill. That's why when I was interviewed by American Association of Foreign Policy, you can find that in YouTube as well. That they actually, some of the smart people actually proposed that the United States should invite China to build the infrastructure for the United States. And honestly, that China does have the skills and technologies in quickly doing infrastructure project.
Right. Yeah, I think this is a very good note to end our discussion. I'm sure that we will have more occasions to discuss because this is such a wide range of matters. We need to cover all these issues, and I'm sure we will have more such very fruitful and exciting discussions with you. You have such a base of knowledge and experience with these matters, and also you being here in Europe, in Denmark, you see also things from a different viewpoint, and I think everybody will appreciate this kind of dialogue. And I really thank you for taking the time and having this interview with us.
It's my pleasure. It's my honor.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing you again, and also for new podcasts for our viewers. Please visit our website for more updates. I will put the link to the book by Professor Li Xing in the description below the video, Mapping China's One Belt, One Road. So if you wish, you can order it and read it yourself. Thank you very much for being with us.